Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What with Dan and Julie. Today we have Giles Paley-Phillips on, who is an author and a podcaster. Hi Giles, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
All good. It's a bit of a miserable day, to be honest.
It is. It's pouring. It's just started pouring down the rain down here as well. I'm down on the south coast.
Oh, are you? Whereabouts?
So I live in a little town called Seaford, which is sort of geographically, it's best to sort of describe as in between Eastbourne and Brighton.
Oh, lovely.
But yeah, it's a sleepy little town. Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely, but yeah, it's not lovely today. It's actually hacking down with rain.
So do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what you actually do, Giles?
So, well, I do quite a lot of different things actually, but I guess my main gig is writing. I write for. I've written 9 children's books and a book for adults, which is a verse novel, and yeah, various sort of written in various magazines and stuff as well. So, yeah, this writing is my main gig, but I do also podcast.
So how did you first sort of get into the writing? Where did the love come from?
Well, I spent many, many years playing in bands. That was my kind of main thing. That was my main creative outlet, I guess. And when I left college, or I sort of dropped out of college, I should say, education, I never was really into sort of academic stuff. I wasn't particularly good at school. And so I found music, and music was a big thing for me. And I joined a band with some mates from college, and we got quite good, and we did a few tours around the country and played some big festivals and stuff like that. So music was my main thing, really. And then when I found out my wife was expecting our first child, I think this happens for quite a lot of children's authors in particular, that you sort of get this sort of compulsion to kind of write a story for them. I think for some people, I think they say they read some of the books that they buy their kids and they think, oh, I could do something better. But it certainly wasn't that for me. It was just actually feeling inspired by some of the things I'd read, and gifts we'd been given and stuff that were books, and thinking, oh, I quite like this. And actually just that nostalgic thing for me as well, like going back and seeing books that I loved as a kid and thinking, oh, I'd really love to really create something timeless, so that's how I got into the writing.
Wow, that's a really interesting angle as well, sort of, not being academic as such. When we think of authors, I think a lot of people think, oh God, I need to be particularly good in school and all of that, but that's an interesting way to come at it.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I didn't do very well. I got 1 GCSE. Ironically, it was in English, so I guess
helps.
There was something there, yeah. But yeah, I just wasn't into school. I didn't have particularly great home life. Was living in a 1-bed flat with my dad and my nan, so it was a bit, we were hard up, and it was just a bit difficult and challenging time, I guess. And for some people, school is an outlet for that, and it's a distraction from things. It wasn't that for me. I mean, I was into sport and stuff like that, but I was never quite good enough. I was really into football and running and athletics and things, but I kind of always knew I wasn't quite good enough to sort of ever make it in that field. So I was always sort of searching for stuff, and it wasn't until I sort of joined the band that I sort of found that thing, that creativity. I obviously wired that way. That being a creative is something that that really appeals to me.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you went to college and you dropped out. What did you sort of go to college to do?
To start with, GCSE retakes. Well, because I think you get kind of swept along with the system, because you think, well, I've got to go to school, and then you've got to go to college, and then you've got to go to university, and otherwise you're not going to get a job. It's that kind of thing, and I think it's very much the same now for people. So kind of just went along with what everyone else was doing.
Could you talk a little bit about the process writing your first book? Like, what sort of happened for you, and how did it get started, and how did it carry on from there?
So when I sort of decided that I really wanted to do something for my son, to write this story, I was really sort of, like I said to you, I was looking at other books and other authors that are around, and sort of tapping into other people's work and seeing if there was something that would inspire me and get me going, because it's not something I'd done before. You kind of get used to. For me, I'd been playing in bands for quite a few years, and I'd written lyrics and stuff, but I'd never really written anything before. And so it was one day, there's one specific moment really, which was that kind of eureka moment, that kind of light bulb moment, was when I was working in manager of a toy shop, which was a job I'm very, very fond of. It was very great. And on my lunch break, I went up to, I was just looking around some charity shops, I think, just again, trying to find some inspiration to sort of start writing something. And I came across a book by an author called Shel Silverstein, who subsequently I found out is huge in the States, but like hardly anyone had heard of him over here. He's kind of like Roald Dahl in America. He's like, every kid's got a Shel Silverstein book.
Wow.
And he writes these kind of nonsense poems, like I guess sort of reminiscent of Spike Milligan's poems and stuff like that. Very sort of silly, but with funny sketchy drawings and stuff as well. And I found this book called The Light in the Attic, and I got almost even like the cover was quite prescient. It was, this it's got a guy on the front with a house in his head. It's quite abstract and weird, but it's just the idea, this light in the attic, like this light bulb moment, kind of seems quite apt as well. But I started flicking through it, and they were just hilarious, these poems. I just thought, this is the kind of stuff I want to write, And so I remember running back to work, and it was in my lunch break, and I started pulling out bits of till roll and post-it notes that we had on the side, and just writing ideas, and I kind of wrote my first story that day, and my first publishing deal came from one of the ideas that came out with it at that time.
We were talking to Marianne O'Hotter the other day, and she was sort of talking about writing her first book and the process that goes into it, and it's not what everyone thinks. You don't get that spark of inspiration and then sit there. You have to put the hours in. Is there a process that you kind of follow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one particularly with children's books. I mean, firstly, I will say that they're not easy to write by any means, which is some people, particularly like picture books, people think, oh, it's only 32 pages. It must be really easy to do that. It's not. It's really hard. And there is an element of that, like crafting away at stuff. But for me, I think I found like moving to doing a novel was a lot more difficult, and a lot more had to go in it. A lot more time and effort went to it. I think when I've written sort of kids' books, children's books, they tend to be fairly spontaneous moments, and I'm not a prolific writer by any means, but once I'm in, like an idea strikes, I kind of really hammer at it for a day or 2 days, and sometimes books have come out that quickly, and then you can refine it afterwards. There is a craft in it, but yeah, it tends to, for me, particularly with the children's books, it's been very kind of rapid, organic. The organic process is quite quick and rapid, and I sort of really lean into it for a very long time. But the like I say, the novel was a totally different experience.
How sort of important is it for you writing children's books that you have balanced sort of entertainment with education in it?
Well, I don't. It's not something I ever really think about too much. Really, I just kind of write what comes naturally, or what.
Okay.
So
I was only because I noticed like some of your titles are like things you never knew about different things.
Yeah, well, the dinosaur one. I mean, it's the Things You Never Knew book, the dinosaurs one, and the Father Christmas one. I mean, they are. They're just silly, kind of. A best way to describe a picture book, I think Julia Donaldson once said this, and it's really true. Is like a picture book is often like it's a joke, and then like the last couple of pages is the punchline, and it is really like that. It's that you're kind of telling a joke almost. Particularly with funny, and I tend to write kind of funny kids books. But yeah, it's that idea, like you're kind of building up with and publishers sort of say like, it's really important to have good page turns, which obviously is important in novels and stuff as well. But to have that very specific thing to make the child turn over the page, and that excitement of turning over the page is really important. So yeah, that concept of it being like a joke with a punchline is kind of how I come at it a little bit. Okay.
And you've obviously we spoke a little bit about the novel you've written. You sort of build up. Obviously, you've said, when you first started writing sort of your first children's book, did you think you could move on to writing bigger novels?
No, I mean, it was never really. I mean, to be honest, when I first started writing, it was like I say, it was something I was kind of doing for my child, and then I kind of got the courage to send it out to a few places, kind of never thinking that, I certainly didn't think I'd ever be like 10 books later, so yes, it wasn't something that was particularly in my head, although I think we've all like, that great saying, we've all got a book in us. I think I always kind of wanted to, once I got into doing writing, it was always something I wanted to do, was to write a novel, but write a novel on my own terms, not write a straight kind of prose. None of my work's been particularly like straightforward. I always try and I often make things difficult for myself, because I try and write in I've written I wrote a kid's book where a monster eats the kids. And I've written another book called Little Bear on the Moon, which is all about grief and loss. So I'm always kind of coming at it from trying to come at it from a different angle. And when I did first start writing 152 Days, which is my novel, it's written in verse. So I really wanted to write something that was a bit different, a bit more niche, not something that was mainstream necessarily. And I've always kind of been into those kind of things creatively, whether it be alternative rock music or sort of indie films, or foreign films, or even in sort of in literature. Like, I've always been, for me, it's always been more interesting to see things that are a bit more left field, and I was kind of trying to bring that into my own work.
So when you sit down to write, is there an average day that you have a plan, you are going to stick to these tasks, or does it vary?
Oh, it totally varies. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, it really does vary. It does. I don't dedicate a particular amount of time to it, and obviously, when you're in a project, you kind of, you kind of try and give yourself a few sort of like personal deadlines. But I think I've always tried to avoid those a little bit, and try and do it at my own pace. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not prolific by any means, and so it kind of comes and goes. And I do sort of dig into other projects to keep me, to keep my creative sort of process going. So I'm not always kind of writing. It's, I might be podcasting or still playing a band, so still doing music. So I like to not necessarily just really hone on one. I think that actually helps me as well with the writing. So when I can dig into it, I can really give it a bit more dedication. But I'm not doing it. I know there's some authors, like I think I read about Alexander McCall Smith, who writes a ladies detective agency. He said, I think that he has to write like 10,000 words a day or something.
Oh my God!
So
wow.
that is, and I've heard of other authors saying that they like to write at least 2,000. Whatever it might be, they give themselves a thing, and I just can't work like that. It's not in my writing's really, really hard. Make no bones about it. It's a really, really hard occupation. In so many ways, the actual doing of it is hard, and then everything, the whole process is difficult. So I wouldn't want to sugarcoat it. I think it's all lovely, and I just sit all day writing. It's not like that at all.
Speaking of that, what kind of a job is it? I mean, you have to sit down and write, so there's some sort of office space or some sort of writing den that you're in, but then I guess there's a lot of promotion that goes into it, book deals and whatnot. So do you have to be traveling around? What kind of job is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, in normal times, I would be. Obviously, we're not in normal times at the moment, so things have changed in that respect. So, I mean, yeah, particularly with the children's books, you go and do school visits, libraries, that kind of stuff. So there is that kind of element to it, and I think I put a tweet out the other day actually, and I said it felt like I was sort of talking to a few people, and it feels like sometimes particularly with creative fields, that it's kind of 10% the work, 90% hustling, and you're kind of it's kind of a constant sort of, you're constantly promoting things, you're constantly hustling for stuff, for work or projects to get off the ground or whatever it might be. So the actual work side of stuff is kind of quite minimal sometimes. But yeah, I've often I've just got a desk in our bedroom. It's kind of where I'm doing the podcast from tonight. Actually, we've got all the mics set up because I do podcasts myself, so kind of recording here as well. It's a kind of it's a multi-purpose room, but yeah. But Jim, who I do Blank podcast with, we've just written a non-fiction book together, and I kind of decided for that one that I really wanted to be out in the public. So I mean, I wrote it before we went into lockdown, but that, I went and sat in a local cafe and like every morning, and just sat in there and sort of trying to soak in and like have conversations with people about things that were going on in the book, things that we brought, subjects we talked about the book, trying to sort of gauge people's ideas about those and things, and actually just soak in a bit of sort of the public atmosphere and try and kind of gauge and have conversations with people. I felt that really helped with that book in particular. So that was quite interesting to work in that space.
Speaking of the Blank Pod, how did that come about, and where are you taking it?
Well, interestingly enough, it kind of came out from a period of time where I wasn't able to get into writing. I was really struggling with it. I was having, I guess you could call it writer's block. I know some people say there's no such thing, but there definitely is that thing. And I know a lot of people that suffer from it. So I was having that, and Jim, who I do it with, he's a stand-up comedian, and he kind of got fear of getting back out on stage. And we thought it was really an interesting concept, this kind of like the idea of blank, blankness and going through a blank moment in your life, or difficult moment, whether it be creatively. And I guess it started the kind of the genesis of it was that idea that we, for creative people having difficult moments and how that impacts their lives. But as it's evolved, I mean, we've ended up talking to lots of different people, not just creative people, but sports people, politicians, broadcasters, writers, all sorts of things. It's not just been, people in creative fields. We found that actually that blank thing can actually mean so many other things. I mean, it can mean imposter syndrome, or public failure, or social anxiety, or grief, loss, those things. So it's not just like kind of not losing your way creatively. It's also these other things, real life things, the things that affect us, and we're kind of sort of investigating those things now a little bit with people who are incredibly successful at what they do. And that's the brilliant thing about it, is we talk to these people who, you think, well, they've got it sorted. They're really, and, like everybody else, they have the same neurosis about things, the same anxieties, and the same, like say imposter syndrome, all those kind of things come up on the pod all the time with people that, and that's so refreshing to know that we are all so much the same in that way. And it's, I mean, Jim and I call it it's our therapy session every week. So
it's good to have that platform to show that everybody's a bit vulnerable, aren't they? It doesn't matter how successful everyone is. Everyone has these fears, and I think that's really a good way for everyone to know that, because I think some people think, it's only me that's got these feelings.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what's been great about it. And like I say, talking to people who you think are really sorted, and hearing their stories and how they, and actually also garnishing kind of ideas about how to get through those things, which is the thing we do at the end of every episode, is we ask our guests to give advice, and that's been massively helpful for me and Jim. I mean, I'm obviously still writing. I'm getting back at, we're writing a lot, and I've written quite a few things recently, and also Jim's get back out. Well, obviously not at the moment, but he has done some live shows. So, it's really helped both of us, and it's informed us and helped us get through our own kind of blank moments, if you like.
Yeah, that's good. What would be some of the personality traits that you sort of see in yourself and maybe other authors around you that you think help you succeed?
I think the main thing, and it's the thing I said, when anyone ever asks me about how do I get into writing and what do I do to take that step further, is persistence. And I think all the authors that I know and worked with, or I know personally, that is the real key, is the persistence thing. And I don't just mean like persistence as in like keep emailing editors like, will you read my stuff? I just meant like persistence in like creating stuff as well. Keep creating all the time and getting better at what you do and your craft. We touched on that earlier, didn't we? The craft of it and stuff. I think just being really persistent in every aspect of that thing, and actually really, if you love that, and I think falling in love with that particular art form and really doing it to the best of your abilities. And I think the most successful kind of artists of all kind of things that will be a big sort of part of it, is that persistence of mind and persistence of just really, really going for it and pursuing that thing to the 8th degree, you know.
And what are some of the biggest positives and opportunities you've had out of your career as an author so far?
Well, I mean, like I say, when, you know, normal times go and do like events and stuff, that's amazing, going out and seeing. I mean, obviously as an author, you do spend quite a lot of time on your own. It's quite a lonely business.
Yeah.
But so it's not that's always really rewarding. Going out and talking to people about your work it's always nice to talk about your work. You know, I'm enjoying talking about my work tonight. It's really good. You know, that's always a nice thing and gives you a nice feeling.
You obviously said earlier about collabing on the fantasy book there. How was that different to working by yourself?
Oh, I love collaboration. I've always been into collaboration. I think it goes back from obviously being in bands and playing with other guys, and I've always enjoyed collaboration. Obviously, I do the podcast. Both podcasts I do are with other people. So again, that collaboration of work, and actually writing is a collaborative art form. Although you get one person who's writing or coming up with a concept and an idea and writing that story, once it gets to the publishing stage, it's a hugely collaborative thing. You're working with editors and designers and sales teams. The whole project is, there's a little team around each book, you know. So although it looks like, oh, you write a book, you send it off, they publish it. It is actually a very collaborative thing, particularly when you work with an editor. That is a very it's a very important relationship to have, and you know, because you're often kind of bouncing ideas off each other. The editing process can be quite a long one sometimes, particularly if you're working on novels and things like that. So yeah, it's a very collaborative field, more collaborative than people give it credit for, I think. So yeah, and I always like to put that point out because it's so many people go into making a book happen. You know, it's not just a writer and then the publisher just takes it away and they do, you know, they just stick it out there. There's so much goes on, and you know, like even the sales teams, you have to kind of, you've got to sort of work with them and see how best to market your product, you know, your art. I mean, your art, you know, so there's all those sort of things. But yeah, going back to your point, yeah, I mean, hugely rewarding. And I mean, I can't say enough about all the different things that I've got out of being an author, like as regards to being able to pursue other projects as well, not just the joy of having a book and seeing a book out there in the world. There's actually lots of other things that have come out of it as well, which I'm very grateful for.
And what would be some of the less favourable aspects of the industry?
Well, I mean, obviously writing, like I said to you earlier, writing is tough. I mean, it's a tough gig. You know, it takes an awful lot of, you know, lots of elements like discipline and persistence and, like, you know, I mean, like we've had edits this week and it's like homework, you know, it's like doing homework again.
Which you weren't a fan of, were you, at school?
No, exactly. So yeah, exactly. I hated homework. So yeah, I didn't, yeah, always doing it the night before it's supposed to be handed in. So yeah, and edits are hard. So that aspect of it, the creative aspect, is difficult. But I would say from an industry point of view, it's really, really hard to maintain a career because, you know, like I got that first book deal. I thought, okay, I'm kind of in the circle of trust now, and that publisher didn't like any of my other work. So then you got to think, okay, so what do I do now? Do I, you know, and then you sort of have to sort of figure out where you're going to go with your, you know, and find out that actually it's okay to work with other publishers and there's that kind of stuff. And then, you know, you're just kind of like getting stuff out there, hoping for the best. And even now, I mean, you know, 10 books later, I'm still, you know, it's never a guarantee that what you write is going to get published. So it's really, really tricky in that respect. And I mean, even more so at the moment, it's, you know, the industry's going through a tough time. So yeah, as are all creative industries. So yeah, it's yeah. So it's overall it's a pretty tough gig, but I don't want to. I feel like I'm being a bit negative about it, but it's incredibly brilliant as well. You know, it's incredibly amazing and rewarding and lovely, but there are downsides to it, definitely.
So I think one of the biggest questions for me would be, how do you actually, once you've written the book, what is the process of actually then getting that published? You know, it sounds like a bit of not a dark art, but not many people know about that world.
No, it's funny. I always, again, when I get loads of messages, particularly on Twitter, people messaging me saying, "Oh, I've written a book," or "I'm thinking of writing a book." Will you read it? No, no, no. Sometimes they want me to read it. I think it's an unknown entity a little bit. I think, and I had to learn it, and I've learned it the hard way over many, many years. I think I always say to people, there's two things, particularly with children's books. I always say, get a copy of the Writers and Artists Yearbook. It really is like the sort of Bible of publishing. It's got loads and loads of advice in it. It's got literally every contact detail for agents and publishers in the world, not just the UK. So that's a really useful thing to have. If it's children's writing, I always suggest people join Scooby, which is I always forget that it's SCBWI, which is an organisation for children's writers and illustrators, and they're really, really supportive and help you hone your work, and then they give you advice on legal stuff if you're getting a contract, all that kind of stuff. So they're really good, and they have loads of groups all around the country. And so so I think that, and then also like joining a writers group is really important, I think, if you can, just to be able to share your work and stuff. But then it's just a case of kind of really just sending your stuff out there and hoping that you get some feedback. It's a tricky thing to do. One, because you're like kind of putting your own work out there, so there's a sort of vulnerability involved in it because it's your work, and then letting other people see it, particularly when it's a professional person seeing it, and worrying about. And I guess there's you've got to figure that there's going to be some sort of rejection or something like that. So you've got to sort of build yourself up to all those kind of things as well. So yeah, it's a tricky kind of thing.
It's not straightforward, is it?
Not at all. No, it's not. And no creative arts are, to be quite honest, they're all difficult. If you're an actor, you've got to kind of do castings and auditions, and you got this, you get a similar kind of thing. And actually, the publishing industry, the thing that annoys me most about publishing industry is it works so slowly. It's a very slow. And things are sort of sorted out very much in advance as well. So, it might be years in advance sometimes. I remember when my first book got published, I thought I was going to, it's going to be released within months. And it took 4 years for it to come out.
4 years?
4 years, yeah.
Oh
because like lists changed and like direction of the publisher changed. Like they never wanted to not release the book, but, just these things that you don't even think about. And then, in the meantime, I managed to, get another couple of books published. So that wasn't the first book that I got the publishing deal for wasn't the first book that got released. But
really,
yes. So it's just, and I mean, I think I was probably unlucky in that respect. But those sort of things do sometimes happen, and I think you just have to be. I think for anyone that's going into it, I think I always try and be just like let them be aware that it's not a straightforward path, and and it's going to be. Yeah, you're going to get frustrated and probably quite emotional and upset at points as well. So I think you just have to be, I think just make sure that you sort of look after yourself and don't take things to heart too much. And sometimes these things just, they just take longer than you expect.
From the outside, it looks like it's still quite an antiquated industry. From the, technology hasn't really touched it or speeded up any of its processes.
No, and I think when Kindles came in and the ebook readers and stuff, people were really worried. I think as they were when MP3s came out and iPods and stuff. So I think there was a definite thing, but I think a lot of people have started to return to physical books.
I love a book. I can't read on Kindles or iPads or anything. It's got to be a solid book.
Did that actually affect the industry, having the Kindles come out on like book purchases?
Well, I think it probably did. I think it did for a period, but I think like sales are gone the other way now completely. Okay. So I think people and actually I would say to a certain extent that children's books in particular have really kind of maintained the status quo with regards, because you don't really want to be reading, people don't want to read to their children on an iPad or whatever. That's not nice. And actually children's books, obviously, it's the reason why I wrote a book in the first place. I wanted that shared experience with my child at bedtime, reading them a story. And so that's very special for parents. And I think actually you can't do that on a digital device. You have to have a physical book for it, really, I think. So that would be, I would say, actually, to a certain extent, children's books never really veered away too much. I think certain platforms tried to, and I think obviously a lot of books are available on Kindle still and iPads and stuff, but it's just not the same. And I'm like you, I love physical books. I think, there's something special about physical books.
Something about the smell of a new book as well.
Yeah, it's something. It's just a very lovely tactile thing. I think technology is great and it's fantastic, but I think there's certain things that we need to try and keep them.
Yeah,
and it's such an ancient art form, isn't it? Writing and books. I think it's nice that it's has been able to survive actually. Whereas I know vinyl's coming back, but music to a certain extent is still very much digital at the moment, and I think that's a shame in some ways.
Certainly. So we like to talk a little bit about salary expectations for anybody thinking of going into the industry. Now, we usually research figures, and as you can imagine, it was quite difficult with authors because it just varies so wildly. And there was some talk of at the average sort of first book deal you might get something like £10,000. But I guess it's all down to personal experience and how you promote the book and whatnot. But how does that sort of fit with you?
I wish we got that much money. Children's books are, particularly children's books, very, very expensive to produce. You're having to, particularly with a picture book, which is fully colour illustrated. They're very expensive books to produce. So, you've got to pay an illustrator and an author. So the author, I think my first book deal I got about £3,000, and I would suggest that fee hasn't gone up very much in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So it's not, don't give up the day job. It's very difficult unless you can produce multiple books a year. And like I said to you, I'm not prolific, so it doesn't matter. My adult book I did through Unbound. So I don't know if you know about Unbound, but they are it's like a crowd fund. It's not it's not crowdfunding, but it's that sort of thing. You basically people purchase a pre-order, and then once enough pre-orders have been made, then it goes into production. So it's almost like that. So it's a slightly different kind of business model. Lots of people are using now because actually you can get your book straight to your audience, which is really nice. I think Vic Reeves has just recently done a book, and quite a lot. And Jackie Morris, who's a very big children's author, has done one. I think Michael Rosen's just done one with them as well. So that's a really interesting business model. It's a slightly different business model to the regular publishers. But like you say, I think it varies massively. I think there was a while back people would started putting, I think because of the diversity issue with a lot of black and ethnic minority authors not getting similar kind of deals to their white counterparts. I think a lot of people were starting to release what they were making and what they were earning in advances. And that was quite interesting. And there was obviously a very, it was very interesting to see how people were being paid. And, so, like you say, it's very wildly different from wherever they are. I think it depends on, if you've had a hit book, then you can command quite a huge advance fee. But, for other people, it's, you can get very basic, sometimes not even enough to earn a living from it. So and actually that's probably the majority of authors are doing other things. They're not just writing. I would say actually it's a minority of authors that actually,
and that's similar, like we've said, to the other arts as well.
I mean, I know lots of actor friends and comedians that have to do other things. I do other lots of other things, podcasts and doing a bit of commercial kind of writing and stuff as well. So that because it's very difficult to sustain an income from it long term, and like I say, unless you're a very big celebrity or you're a very well established author who's got big sales, like people. I mean, I'm sort of off the top of my head, people like kind of Matt Haig or J.K. Rowling, those kind of people, the huge kind of authors that sell multi-million-pound book deals. That because they sell a lot of units.
Do you think in this day and age, with the sort of growth of personal branding and social media and things, I'm thinking of basically James Haskell released a couple of books recently, and through his personal brand and all of that, his book sales have sort of spiked. Does that help writers now? I guess it's a silly question. It does help them, but do you look to do that sort of work as well, building a personal brand?
I suppose your audience probably isn't on Instagram though.
Yeah, my Twitter's my biggest thing, I think. But I think I think it's important. I think I've had this conversation with actors actually on our podcast, and some of them saying they sometimes don't get roles because they haven't got a good social media following.
Wow.
So it's a really tricky thing. I don't think
it's playing a role now, isn't it? In a lot of creative decisions.
Yeah, it is. It's massive. And I think I would argue that I've got a big following on Twitter. I don't think it makes a hell of a lot of difference to me personally with regards to getting a book deal. But I think it helps. It does certainly help to sell more books, for sure. But yeah, I don't know if personally it helps me particularly, but I think it obviously helps some people. Sure.
Okay. Sort of an odd question, as you have never really had a job description, I can't imagine. But what if you did have one? What would be something that would not be in there that you have to deal with every now and then? Something that you probably didn't expect that you have to deal with.
Oh, that's tricky, isn't it? Job description that I didn't expect. I guess it's because it's such weird. Well, it's like there aren't any hours.
Yeah.
It's just when you can and when you're willing. It's kind of thing, I suppose. So sometimes I do wish sometimes there was a bit of a clock in, clock out. It'd be quite nice. We obviously talked about that earlier about sitting down and just writing for the sake of it. But I can't. I'm not one of those people. So I think, but it would. Yeah, I think sometimes actually, that. Knowing that you had a specific amount of time, I think it is good to give people deadlines to work to, definitely. And actually, like I say, I've been doing this non-fiction book. We had quite a tight deadline, and that was good. It really meant that I had to plow on with it, and that was really nice. It was a good motivator, basically. So I think maybe the hours. I didn't agree these hours, basically.
How would somebody begin to progress in the industry? From your first book to now, have you done anything differently? Have you learned anything that might help someone progress?
I think I was saying earlier about sharing work. I think that's really important to not share your ideas as such, but like to share it with like-minded people and other people within your industry. I've got couple of friends in Seaford where I live who are also authors published, and I meet up with them quite regularly just to kind of chat about stuff and talk to them about what they're doing and what I'm up to, and then maybe sometimes sharing our work with each other. I think that really, really helps. I think sort of getting tips from each other and just being able to sort of console each other as well, like when things aren't going that well. I think that helps massively as well. So I think, there's a lot to be said for just reaching out and talking to people that are in your industry. I think that, not to sort of, try and get a leg up, but just to get some advice and hear how they're doing it and see if there's ways that you can be sort of improving the way you do stuff. So, I think that's really important.
And would you still go into the industry knowing what you know now?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I probably would. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't. I can't complain. I really can't complain. As much as all jobs have their tricky things, don't they? I mean, whatever you do in life is going to be, So I'm very, very lucky. I'm very, very lucky. I get to work from home. I get to dictate my own hours to a certain extent. So I'm very fortunate. So I wouldn't change it for the world, really.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, Giles. It's been really interesting to hear about your career and how you've sort of progressed, and wish you all the best of luck with Blank Pod and future books.
Thank you very much. No, it's been a pleasure. Thanks to
Thank you again. Where can people find you on social media as well as your Instagram and your books?
So yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm at Eli is Tender, so that's ELIISTENDER 10. So Eli is Tender 10. And yeah, I mean, you can get my books from the usual outlets. Obviously, if you've got an independent bookshop near you, please do go to get your book from them. If not, there are Waterstones and Amazon. And or actually, you can use the hive.co.uk online. I think that sources books from independent bookshops, so that's really worth using. Yeah, so you can find them and work there. And podcasts, you can find on all the normal platforms. It's Blank Podcast, or also I do another podcast with Julia Bradbury called A Little Bit of Positive. So yeah, please do subscribe there. That's the end of my sale. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giles. Cheers.
No, cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.